I had a really good book reading year. According to my statistics on my chart for this year, and this is actually, I'm filming this before the end of the year, so I'm actually going to read a couple more books, but I don't think anything's going to change between now and then. I have 36 5-star reads, and now I've read over 100 books, so that's a good chunk of books that got 5 stars. And I think I got 16 4.5s, 56 4s. Those are all good. Anything above a 4 is probably in the running for being favorite book of the year. So this was a really hard list to make. Because I didn't read a lot of NetGalley things this year, because I didn't have to read things for school necessarily, it was a lot easier to just prioritize things I thought would be interesting and read those. And when it turned out my tastes were right, it was a new favorite. I don't have a lot of physical copies of these, or if I do, they're in my classroom library I can't access right now. So we're going to have to play a little fast and loose with these rules. I am going to have some honorable mentions along with these 10 favorites. They're in no particular order. There is no way I could order them. I would try to maybe pick a favorite by the end of the video, but we'll see. The first book on this list is The Wolf and the Woodsman by Ava Reed. I read this in January. It's amazing. If you have not picked it up already this year, please God, make this the first book you read in 2022. This is such a good book. It has everything you want. It has enemies to lovers. It has religious trauma. It has a boy who is willing to throw it all away for a feral girl. It has the one bed trope, and they don't even have beds. This is a really good book. It's so good. The only thing I would recommend is if you are not into body horror, you may want to give this a skip. If you can handle light body horror, you'll be okay. But basically, the woodsmen in this book, they use sort of self-harm as a way to get power and favor from God. And it's a little bit dramatic sometimes. So just bear that in mind. But this is based on Jewish mythology. You can see the story of Esther in here. You can see the story of the Golem in here. It's a very, very good book. And I really love our protagonist and her love interest. I think they're very well developed. And this is just, it's all vibes, no breaks. This is probably my favorite book of the year. I don't want to be like, yes, for sure to any of these, but this is high up there. And again, if you have not read it, you really, really need to. Next book on the list is one I do not have a physical copy of. I'm sorry. And it's Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas. I read this one in January as well. It took me like a day to read because it was so amazing. I flew through it. It made me cry. I loved that book so much, and the relationship between the different characters. I thought the two boys had the best love story. They were so cute and sarcastic and snarky, but they really cared for each other. I love the idea of a vegan witch, so she can't really do magic like she's supposed to because she's not going to use animal blood. That's very funny to me, and very, very interesting take on that, and sort of a modernization of these traditions. And I do like that that's kind of the point of the novel itself, is how our traditional views of the way things should be can be flipped in more modern times and with modern sensibilities. A lot of people have read this book and loved it. You don't need me to tell you, but you absolutely should pick up Cemetery Boys. The next one is also one I do not have a physical copy of. I listened to the audiobook of When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole. I did this one for the Literally Dead Book Club, and it was amazing. It's about gentrification. It's a thriller based on gentrification, and it is fascinating and terrifying. I can't imagine being someone who also lives that experience reading that novel, because it would be just really traumatic to read, so maybe bear that in mind. But it is a really good concept of what happens when gentrification becomes like sort of Stepford Wivesy a little bit. And it has two very different perspectives. You have someone who has grown up in the community, and you have someone who has come in and has taken one of these homes that are being gentrified. It is just, it's very good. It's very good. I think some good conversations have come from this. I'm not the one to ask about representation and whether it was well done, but I thought it was a very good book and entertaining, and I think you should pick it up. The next book I don't have a physical copy of because I've already taken it to school, and it is Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Boulay. It is, I call it new adult. I think it's classified as YA, but it's definitely new adult. The girl has graduated. Our main character has graduated from high school at the beginning, and she's considering college, and it is very heavy theme-wise. It's about her trying to like bust a drug ring, and There's sexual content that happens, and there's some assaults that happen. It's a very heavy book. Like that's not a book you need to pick up lightly. It is a very heavy book. It talks about drug issues and drug use in certain communities, and who is the victim and who is at fault in those. It has some discussions about missing women and how missing Native and Indigenous women usually aren't given the same attention that maybe like white women would, and it raises some really good points in that. But I thought it was beautifully written. I listened to it on audiobook, which I think would be the route to take. There is a lot that is written in the Anishinaabe language that just, when you hear it, it sounds really beautiful. So I would recommend the audiobook for this one, but that is one of my favorites this year. The next favorite, I do have a physical copy of. I did a buddy read of Big Little Lies. I think it was in, April, May, June, something. It was when it was warmer, because I remember reading it outside. But I did a buddy read with Gina with this one, and it lived up to the hype, and we were so excited because, holy crap, it lives up to the hype. This is a, mommy thriller, and it's about these women who have kids in the same school and the different secrets they have about their husbands and their families, and by the end, you still have no idea what's going on. You think you do, because you get snippets of, the things that are happening currently, and you have no idea. But it's so funny, too. These women are hilarious, and it's just written very realistically. You can almost picture people in your life that would be like this. Well, maybe not if you don't know any, upper middle class women, maybe you'd struggle. But I thought it was really good. If you haven't picked it up by now, I would recommend reading it. I have not seen the show still. Maybe I'll watch it at some point. But the book was really good. Okay, the next one, I'm going to make sure I try to say his name correctly. Another favorite I read during the Asian readathon is the nonfiction memoir, When Breath Becomes Air, by Paul Kalanathi. He got cancer. He was a neurosurgeon that got cancer, and it's sort of him reflecting on why he chose to go into the medical field when he was so into English. He was very into reading and composition. And he sort of married these two loves in this book, and it was beautiful, and it made me cry. It is a fantastic, very quick read. I listened to it on audiobook, and it feels like you're listening to someone sort of explain themselves, which I really like about memoirs and nonfiction, when it sounds like someone is trying to justify things they've done. And his story is just very sad. He got cancer. He thought he had gotten better, and he ended up the cancer came back, and he passed away not long after his daughter was born. And so the epilogue is actually written, his wife wrote it, about when he passed and what happened after that. And it's very moving to think about someone being so aware of their mortality and still giving us a work of art in the face of that. It's just beautiful. The next, I also don't have a physical copy of. It is in my classroom library, but it is The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. I had a hard time choosing between this one and Clap When You Land. I thought both were really good, but I picked The Poet X because it spoke to me more deeply than Clap When You Land did. I think Clap When You Land, I had some uncomfortable feelings about that, the idea of secret families and stuff. I'm still not prepared to talk about and deal with that and think about it for very long. But The Poet X, about a girl who's kind of hiding her poetry talents because she's supposed to be this perfect daughter, was something. It really was. And the idea of purity culture within this community, I myself grew up in the white evangelical church purity culture, so I had some relatability to this. But the audiobook of The Poet X is also, I think, the way to go. All of her audiobooks, all of Elizabeth Acevedo's audiobooks are narrated by her. And she does a fantastic job every time. It's absolutely phenomenal. It's a really, really good book. It's a very quick read, and I highly recommend it if you have not already picked it up. A lot of you probably have, but this is your sign, if you haven't, to pick it up and listen to it. The next book is My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones. He has made it onto my top 10 2 years in a row. This was amazing. It is about a girl named Jade who is obsessed with horror movies, and she thinks that this new girl who's moved into town is the next final girl in her town. This novel does what I was promised with The Last Final Girl, which is also a Stephen Graham Jones book I read this year, and it does the Final Girl support group better. If you have read either of those and you're neither of these are quite hitting the spot, this is the one you want to pick up. And it's divisive. I know not a lot of people, like it, But I love this. I watch the YouTube channel Dead Meat, and so I know a lot of the movies that she mentioned here because I've watched his essays and watched the podcast that Chelsea does about it. And the small references to different slashers that I've like grown up watching and I love watching. It was really nice to see. And all the different connections and Jade's insistence that she is helping the final girl get to where she's supposed to be instead of her reflecting and thinking maybe it's her that's supposed to go through this. She doesn't read her own trauma as development. She reads it as development for someone else, which is in itself its own issue. I didn't know until a little while ago that this was going to be a trilogy, and I'm really excited now because that was my one like complaint about this book, is that the ending is just very abrupt, and you don't really know what's happening and it's over. So I'm both excited and hesitant that this is going to be a 3-book series because I'm nervous that the second one's going to let me down. But this one was so good, even if you only read this one and you don't pick up either of the other 2 books, this is probably going to be a good one, especially if you're like a weird little horror nerd who likes learning about horror novels and you like thinking about the idea of final girls and why we have them and what the relationships are between final girls and their killers. Like, that is the book you need to read. Like, don't worry about the final girl support group. Like, read this instead. The next book I also don't have a physical copy of. It is Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson. I finally picked that up. I thought it was fantastic. It was very funny, lighthearted, but still mysterious. You don't know what's going on. I love the vibes of this school campus in the middle of like Vermont, in the middle of nowhere, and they don't really know what's going on, and all these kids are so well developed and interesting to read about. I liked the whole series. I think the whole series is good, and I'm ready to read anything else Maureen Johnson writes about Stevie. Like, I think that she is a great protagonist. I love how competent she is in figuring out who's killing people, and I will watch her forever. Just like, lead the way, Miss Johnson. I will read all about Stevie. Please write more books. I read the whole series this year. I need more books. Anyway, that whole series could be on the top 10, honestly. But Truly Devious, Box in the Woods. Box in the Woods probably is a good one, too. Box in the Woods is good. The next one is the only Grady Hendrix to make it on the list because I read 3 of his books and I only liked this one, and it is My Best Friend's Exorcism. I thought this was beautiful. It made me very sad. But also it was delightfully horrific. The idea of tapeworms and parasites is just scary to me. So anytime you can play on that, and possession is a big old spooky book to me. But I also like this idea of like maybe possession as a thematic like symbol for the change between friends, like when friends maybe don't get along like they used to. So it's kind of a coming-of-age horror novel. But I thought it was very well written. I think that Grady Hendrix has a better idea of how teenage girls sound than he does adult women. But we'll get into that in my worst books list. But that was My Best Friend's Exorcism. That was number 10 technically on my favorites. And now let's get into a few honorable mentions. Okay, so 10 was hard. 10 was a limit I was not prepared to have to reach. So let's talk about a couple that could have made it onto this list and just didn't. They just didn't make it. I want to include The Gilded Wolves and basically the whole series of The Gilded Wolves. I read that this year and thought it was fantastic. I thought the ensemble cast was amazing. The only reason that didn't make it is because I did it on audiobook, and that was, the narration was weird on that audiobook. That male narrator was very strange. But the books themselves were really good. I also really liked The Bear and the Nightingale. Like, that whole series was fantastic, and I would love to put all of them up there, but that's just kind of an honorable mention. I love The Bear and the Nightingale series. Another book that makes sort of an honorable mentions list is The Excalibur Curse by Kirsten White. This is the final book in the Camelot Rising, I think it is. Is Camelot Rising? Yeah, series, which is about Guinevere. And it was really well done. I did not expect this ending, and it was still really well done. So that's an honorable mention. Another honorable mention is Ice Planet Barbarians. Yes, that's right. The big blue alien sex book. These are so good. This first one and the second one are like solid. They're like the best ones in the whole group. And listen, they're happily ever afters. That's why we like these books. These women are getting happily ever afters, and you don't have to worry about drama. The drama is solved by the end of the book, and everybody's happy, and it's good. It's not perfect, but it's good. Anyway, I'm reading another series now that has the same kind of concept of aliens crashing on an alien planet, and it is terrifying and horrific, and I'm like, kind of miss the happy endings. when only one person died in the first book, which, spoiler alert, like a person dies in this book. And it's not, there's not trauma. There is trauma. Some of these women are dealing with PTSD. Some of the aliens are dealing with PTSD and death and grief, but it's still, you get happy endings. This is a good series, and this book is really good. Go ahead and read it. If you haven't read it, pick it up. Last but not least, on my honorable mentions of favorites is That Way Madness Lies by Dahlia Adler. It's arranged by Dahlia Adler, and it's Shakespeare Reimagined. This is really good. If you like Shakespeare at all, you need to read this book because the reimagined stories in here are fantastic. They go pretty quick. Some take different formats. I think the Romeo and Juliet one is written basically all in text message, and it's amazing. It's fantastic. The audiobook was also very good, so if you are in a pinch and want to read it, listen to it on audiobook. That is it. That was my favorites, and I think it's a toss-up. It's a toss-up. These are both amazing. These are both amazing books, and I'm not going to apologize for liking them and continuing to, like, slut them out to you. I think read these. Read these. I've been saying read this one all year. This one is also really good. Read these books. Read these books so I can stop telling you to read these books. Read these books. These are my favorites of the year. I hope you enjoyed the video. Maybe you'll find a new book that you can read next year and you find a favorite. We're going to have a sit-down chat about my least favorite books in a little bit. So I hope you're all prepared for that tomorrow. Anyway, this has been my top 10. I will see you with the next video. Bye.